Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion. How are you all doing today? I hope you said great. Today I'm coming to you from West Chicago, Illinois, and you see behind me there's a motel. That's actually the motel from the Blues Brothers movie when Elwood meets Twiggy at the gas station and tells her, you know, they can meet up later at the motel at midnight after his show. This is where she's actually waiting. And it's kind of ironic because it's right down the street from John Belushi's childhood home. Daze with Jordan the Lion and you all. It begins right now. That's right, they're doing road construction, so it's pretty noisy, and they've changed the sign since, but Twiggy was literally standing right here waiting for Elwood after that show. And I thought today this would be a fine time to go visit the childhood home of John Belushi, so that's what we're gonna do. Let's do it! Hey there, Jawberry. Everybody's always wondering if you came along for the trip. You are always along for the trip, aren't you? Just a little hot outside right now. So John Belushi's parents were actually Albanian, and so when he was born, they were living in an Albanian neighborhood here in Chicago. And his mother would say that even as a little boy, he had the same personality that he would have as an older man that would make him so beloved by many. She said even at 5 years old, he would be talking to the neighbors and all the people around, and they would say that he came off like a mature 10-year-old. Said he's just a little man. He'd just kind of go off on his own, go do his own thing. He had a nickname named Poncho, and his brother Jim would say that when he got older, John would tell him how John would just kind of wander off through the neighborhood, and there was a local pool, and the pool had separate hours for like women, children, girls, boys, things like that. And they loved Poncho so much they would let him swim anytime. So his father actually ran restaurants, and so most of the time the family, which would have been John, his sister, and his two younger brothers, would be raised by his mother and his grandmother. But by the age of 6 years old, they actually moved into the house that I'm going to show you today. John Belushi is so fascinating to me because I know people that knew him, and they said this guy, when he was in the room, nobody else was in the room. He just had this ability to take over a room. Not even just being funny, but he just was so charismatic, and when he talked to you, he really seemed like he cared and like you guys really were bonding. So it's really neat to see the childhood home that he grew up in, and especially these years, because he was pretty much right out of a cannon. From the time he was born, he was in love with the camera. He was in love with performing. Even though he was Albanian, when they moved to this neighborhood, it was kind of a, you know, kind of a waspy neighborhood, very white and everything. And he looked different, but his personality won everybody over, all of his classmates. So he was pretty popular pretty quick. While he was going to school through junior high and high school, he actually formed a band called the Ravens. He would get involved in the plays at the school. He was on the football team. He was co-captain of the football team. He was a middle linebacker. He was the homecoming king. I mean, that's a lot of stuff. His drama teacher in school said that he was so good that he said when John was about to turn 18, he told him, hey, you know, maybe I can get you into Summer Stock Theater in Chicago. So he called some people he knew, and he said that they said, yeah, bring him in, we'll audition him, we're not going to give him any special treatment, you can drop him off and stay in the car, we don't want you guiding him or giving him any cues or anything. So the teacher said I dropped him off, and about half an hour later somebody came out to get me, and when I went in, John was entertaining the whole room. He had them all in the palm of his hand, and at the age of 18 he was the youngest person they had ever put in that Summer Stock Theater company. He would perform 7 plays in 7 weeks, and then when he got out, he came back to high school. Now the woman he would marry eventually, Judy Jacqueline, he would meet in this neighborhood. She said that they were actually, him and his friends were having a water fight with her and her friends, and John swung his arm back to throw some water and accidentally hit her. And she said that's when he started calling her. She said for weeks he would call and make sure she was okay, and then, you know, she was charmed by him. But she said he always had a dream of being a performer and being a football player. So Illinois Wesleyan College actually, when he was 18, offered him dual scholarships for the theater program and for the football team. However, when they went through the whole process and got everything done, apparently the school itself said that they wouldn't accept John. And by this point, he had turned down all of his other offers. So he formed a comedy troupe, started doing improv, and during that time he developed his Joe Cocker impression, because Jim said, you know, John was always very good at mimicking people that he saw, his family, his friends, things like that. So John became really good at doing this Joe Cocker impression, and the head of Second City heard about it, saw it, and invited John to come audition. And he was so blown away by the audition that John Belushi was put in Second City at the age of 22. He was the youngest person ever brought in, and he was actually put in the main company and basically was stealing the show every night. Belushis were a very close family. John, I mean, to this day, I believe Jim owns John's house in Martha's Vineyard that John loves so much. John was buried in Martha's Vineyard, although where his tombstone is not where he's buried, and there's also a family plot here that we're going to go visit. But John's career really kind of took off from here. He started finding the love in performing and doing everything around here, and then through Second City, he got his start. But then, because of the Joe Cocker impression, National Lampoon found out about him. They were trying to do an off-Broadway production called Lemmings, and it was about like some, basically like a Woodstock cast-off hippies, and so they wanted people that nobody had ever heard of, and they ended up hiring John Belushi, Christopher Guest, Chevy Chase. And Chevy Chase said the only real requirement was you had to be funny and you had to be able to play 2 instruments. So they did this, and through this, of course, John was hilarious. National Lampoon came to him and asked him to run the National Lampoon Radio Hour. And so he went to Second City up in Canada, went to the Second City in Chicago, and found talent that would go on there. And that was where Gilda Radner came from, Brian Doyle Murray. You know, he amassed all those great comedians, Dan Aykroyd, that would eventually end up on Saturday Night Live. Gilda Radner said that actually when Saturday Night Live came about, which is basically what skyrocketed all of them to stardom, she said that Lorne Michaels actually wasn't sure about John Belushi. Apparently, you know, Lorne saw his audition, and Lorne said he came in and did the Samurai, but Lorne just wasn't sure. And apparently Gilda went to him and said, Lorne, he's the funniest one out of all of us. You have to put him on the show. And so, of course, he was put on the show. John was so great that it led them to create a role in Animal House, Bluto, that was written directly for John, and that movie would become a comedy masterpiece. Not only does it stand the test of time, but it was the biggest movie of its day. It was the most popular, most successful comedy of its time, and a lot of that was due to John. So John had a great film career. Of course, he started doing the Blues Brothers and was able to go back into that musical side of his career. As I said, when he was in high school, he had a band called the Ravens, and so people thought when the Blues Brothers came out that it was like a gag, but John said, no, I really love music and I really want this to be treated like a real band. But unfortunately, at the age of 33, he had, you know, drug problems, and unfortunately passed away at the Chateau Marmont. So let's go over and visit the family plot where his parents and where there's a tombstone for John, and we'll talk about everything that happened after and kind of the crazy story involved with his grave. It's kind of cool, the Belushis did have a home video camcorder, so there's lots of home movies of them growing up and playing in this yard. This is a big cemetery. Very nice grounds and beautifully well kept and everything. So if you are looking to come out here yourself, nowhere online could I find it noted where this was at, but it's actually section 7 of the cemetery. Right over here we have John Belushi's headstone with his parents both on there. You can see there's his father Adam, who loved westerns. He was a restaurateur, but he loved westerns, and John Belushi actually was in a movie with Jack Nicholson riding a horse and got his father on the set. So I think that's what that was from. His father's actually in the movie riding horses right next to his son, who is right there, John Belushi. From what I read online, this picture has been stolen and replaced and whatever so many times. Then there's his mother, Jim's mother also, Agnes. She had great style. I've seen several pictures of her online. She was always dressed really amazing. His parents both, of course, outlived him. This says, in loving memory of our son, 1949 to 1982, John A. Belushi. He gave us laughter. Now, when John died in 1982 of a speedball, his wife Judy and the family decided to bury him in Martha's Vineyard. When he was performing in Lemmings, he had actually been introduced to Martha's Vineyard then as kind of a place to go relax and retreat. And he and Judy loved it so much that he had actually financed the Briefcase Full of Blues, Blues Brothers live album himself. And with the royalty check from that, he and Dan actually both bought homes in Martha's Vineyard. So I mentioned earlier, Jim Belushi, I believe, owns that home now. Judy sold it to him. But John loved that place, and he used to sit on the beach there, and he would say that that was the only place that he could find peace and that he could relax. And so when he died, they had his funeral there. He has a headstone there. But the family's been very open about saying he's not buried there. He's not buried where that headstone is. They say he's not far, which makes you think it's in the same cemetery, presumably pretty close by, but who knows? They could have had him move back here. Life takes such crazy turns. Dan Aykroyd at the time of John's death was working on Ghostbusters and had wanted John to be Slimer. So kind of interesting to think of what John's career would have been like had he lived. It's sad to see someone with such a big personality and someone that brought so much joy to people's lives go down a path of something like the drugs, where he just couldn't get away from it and he just couldn't not let it rule his life, and unfortunately he lost his life because of it. John's wife Judy and Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi have all kept the Blues Brothers name and business alive through all these years. Judy actually recently passed away. I'm kind of curious as to whether she was buried where John is. I know she was remarried and had children and moved on, but kind of makes you wonder. I'm not sure. But thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed today seeing John Belushi's childhood home and seeing his family grave. But as of where he really is laid to rest, we may never actually know. Thank you all for watching. Have a great night, and goodbye.
Cause there's a grace by me.